I'm John Heilemann.
And I'm Mark Halperin. With all due respect to tomorrow night's big face-off, we'll definitely be watching closely. On Ye Olde Show tonight, money, cash, and dough. But first, it's all about the Benjamin, specifically Benjamin Carson. He's been ahead of Donald Trump now in 4 straight Iowa polls, including our latest survey. Today, though, he bests El Donald in a New York Times CBS News national poll. It was relatively easy for Trump to dismiss Carson's lead when he was just leading him in Iowa. But, John, now that there seems to be, at least in this one poll, a new national hierarchy, what happens?
Well, it was easy for him in his mind to dismiss Carson's rise in Iowa, although we've seen him lash out at Carson over the last few days. Every time anybody, so far, anybody provokes Donald Trump, he ends up lashing back. So I just think this increases the likelihood that Trump, even though he may not think that Carson is his long-term most threatening foe, he's going to end up going after Carson tomorrow night on stage in Boulder.
Interesting to see if other national polls show this, obviously, and interesting to see if Carson moves up in other state polls. He's obviously moved up somewhat in some places, but Trump still leads big in most New Hampshire surveys, big in most South Carolina surveys. I think that you raise the question, does Trump go after Carson? The other big question now is, does anyone else go after Carson? Carson is the leader. He's in many ways harder to attack than Trump. But what happens on the debate stage now when people try to create tension, which I assume the moderators do, between Carson and other candidates?
This entire Republican race has been a season of denial, right? Everybody has been in denial about the various leaders. For a long time, people were months were in denial about Trump. I suspect that people in the party, that the other candidates in the party, especially the ones in the establishment lane, do not take Ben Carson seriously. Think that he is a flash in the pan. Think that it's okay for him to win Iowa because the Iowa can be just dismissed, and that his rise in the national polls is a blip. It's a phenomenon. They may be right, they may be wrong, but I suspect most of them, because it's harder to take him on and because they dismiss him, will just leave him alone.
Let's see how people think Carson, or don't understand the Carson campaign, maybe think it's run by amateurs. Let's see 2 things now, whether they can capitalize on getting more people to sign up because of the Carson momentum and also fundraising. Carson's been an extraordinary grassroots fundraiser. Most candidates, when they start to do better, if the campaign leverages that, he can raise even more. And since Carson is reliant on donations, unlike Trump, this could be a very big moment if he can keep it up.
Yes, and I mean, the biggest problem for all these guys, we'll talk about this a lot tomorrow, still 10 people up there on that stage. And so, I think there's going to be a lot of people still going after Jeb Bush. I think there are a lot of people who would like to, they see Jeb Bush reeling, hemorrhaging, would like to try to kill him off. I think he'll be a target tomorrow night, too. All right, Ted Cruz. He's bagged a big one. The tech billionaire, Darwin Deason, has bought a first-class, full-fare ticket on the Cruz cruise. A semi-buried storyline of this campaign so far has been Cruz's potent fundraising from small and big donors alike. So while some analysts, including Jeb Bush, have likened Marco Rubio to Barack Obama, circa 2007, maybe after all it's Cruz who bears the greatest resemblance to 44, at least when it comes to money. So, Mark, my question to you is whether Ted Cruz at this moment, because of that mix, that strength, both high and low, whether he is the strongest fundraiser in the entire Republican field.
He is, I think, because it's not just high and low, right? There are 3 ways to raise money. There's the hard dollars, $2,700 at a time. There's grassroots fundraising campaign. And then there's a super PAC with multi-million-dollar checks. Ted Cruz is pretty much keeping pace with everyone, or first or second place in every one of those categories, and that is potent. Bush can raise super PAC money in hard dollars, but has not been great at low dollar stuff. Carson has been good at low dollar stuff, but his super PAC is not as big as Cruz's, and he doesn't raise the $2,700. So I think Ted Cruz, I've been saying for a while, second or third most likely nominee at this point. Yeah. And the money is a part of that, although not the whole thing.
Look, there's been a lot of talk around this, around the edges of our world, about how Cruz is running a more disciplined campaign, a more strategically plausible campaign, and obviously a well-financed campaign, much more so than most people give credit to. I think all of that is true. As we've seen, though, with Jeb Bush, in the end, none of the money matters if you don't have a message that the voters want to buy. And what's interesting to me still is that for all the strength and all the discipline and all the tactical and strategic savvy that Cruz has shown, he still has got a little more traction than Jeb Bush, but still hasn't gotten very much traction, even in places where he should get more.
He's going to get some big ministerial endorsements and conservative grassroots evangelical endorsements in Iowa, I predict. He's also got a delegate strategy long term. But the other thing, great story in the Washington Post this morning about his fundraising, pointed out he's doing really well with elites. When he speaks to, when he switches from grassroots Ted to Princeton, Harvard Ted,
Yep.
he can do well in a room.
And that is in that way, he's very Obama-like, right? Barack Obama back in 2007, people used to say, well, he hated the donors. He could still work that room when he needed to. And that's something you can't say about other plausible Iowa winners from the past. Rick Santorum couldn't do that. Mike Huckabee couldn't do that.
Cruz has not had a great debate yet. I've been expecting him to have one. Let's see if he has it tomorrow night.
All right. Speaking of Jeb Bush, he's buried in the polls. He's being bludgeoned by the press. And he's hoping to get a much-needed boost from his performance tomorrow night at that debate we've been talking about. So what better way to get everyone's pre-debate attention than by releasing an entitlement reform plan? In short, Jeb's plan proposes to scale back Medicare spending, eliminate the payroll tax for seniors, increase the retirement age, and adjust benefits for people who retire early. He also wants to cut waste and fraud. A lot of novelty there. So, Mark, my question for you is whether another policy proposal, and I would say a rather rote one at that, is really the cure for what ails Jeb Bush.
I applaud him for being specific on some things, but right now what he needs for people to see is that he's an exciting, fighting candidate.
Yep.
And a proposal a day before the debate on entitlement reform, I don't get, but I don't think it matters either way. What he needs to do is be a star in the debate.
Right, and you know one of the things we've seen, and we've seen it over and over again over these years, especially in these crowded stage debates with a lot of candidates. The moment is all that matters. It's the moment that gets replayed over and over again. Carly Fiorina's moment at the last debate. I can understand the logic on paper. Hey, we're having a debate about economics. Let's put out an entitlement reform plan the day before, which any normal person would say, you think you're going to have a debate moment on stage on entitlement reform? Totally nuts.
I'm the big truth teller. Not going to work. I think that Jeb Bush, money, policy papers, it's all got to be part of the mix. But he has to figure out how to talk about things he really cares about. He does care a lot about these entitlement issues, but
they're a snooze.
Yeah,
they're a snooze. Even people who care about them find them boring.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you got to start thinking about winning over older voters. Carson's doing pretty well with women.
Yep.
You know, Trump's doing well with non-college educated voters. I think Bush could do better than he's doing with older voters. I'm not sure talking about changing the entitlement programs is the best way to do that.
You got to start winning over some voters somewhere, some block of voters. And right now, Bush doesn't have any traction with any particular block of voters. And entitlement reform, as we know, for all of its virtue, is not something that really appeals to any one block of voters. It should appeal to young voters, but generally does not because they care about flashier things.
Tomorrow, we will be discussing, as everyone will, who needs to win the debate, blah, 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 who's got the most on the line. Jeb Bush has a lot on the line tomorrow night.
Totally.
All right, there's a budget deal on the old horizon. It's a tentative bipartisan pact between Republican congressional leaders and President Obama. It would raise the federal borrowing limit. That means no default next week. It also would increase defense spending and cut some areas in some entitlement programs, like in Medicare and Social Security. There's a bunch of other stuff in the deal. The president got most of what he wanted, clearly got the better of the deal here. John Boehner said the deal, though, is the best possible, and he referred to his likely successor as Speaker, with Paul Ryan, with a whiff of farm imagery.
I made it clear a month ago when I announced that I was leaving that I wanted to do my best to clean the barn. I didn't want him to walk into a dirty barn full of you-know-what. So I've done my best to try to clean it up. It's a solid agreement, and I told my colleagues there isn't any reason why any member should vote against this. This is not the way to run a railroad. But when you've got a situation that we're dealing with today, it's like it wasn't any choice.
I'm going to avoid hurting myself by patting myself vigorously on the back. This was obvious that this was the kabuki that was going to happen. Boehner was going to try to get rid of the two big-ticket, must-pass things. Ryan was going to denounce the deal, which he's done, although he hasn't said he'd vote against it. What are the implications, whether this passes or not going forward now, for Congress, for the president, for 2016 candidates?
First of all, I love that man in so many ways. He looked like he was almost ready to cry just now in that press conference. Also, anybody who's going to refer to the Augean stables, I'm always in favor of. It's a big deal in the sense that, it helps Republicans, even the Republicans who don't know it, it helps them. They needed to keep themselves from shooting themselves in the foot or face again by either shutting down the government or blowing up the debt ceiling and killing the economy. Those would have been disastrous for the congressional wing of the party and for the presidential contenders. By getting that done, taking that gun, the loaded gun, out of the hand of the party, he's done them a big favor.
This will be a huge deal for the Republican Party and for their presidential nominee, whoever it is, if this thing passes and holds. It takes away lots of threats that will be a distraction. Yeah, the president got the better deal. There is thing in here for some Republicans. It does raise defense spending. It does deal with some offsets for the spending increases, and it does eliminate one of the mandates on the Affordable Care Act. But a good deal for the country. Good deal for the Republicans, and great deal for President Obama, who can focus on other things now besides cliffhangers.
Best thing about it, it's not stupid.
Coming up, an old-fashioned WADR twofer. First, Emily's List President Stephanie Schriock, and then the man mentioned by Donald Trump on Twitter today, Sahil Kapoor, after this.
Our guest tonight is the president of Emily's List, Stephanie Schriock. Stephanie, it's great to have you here again on this set. I want to play a clip for you right now. That's the first part of which is set off a little bit of a controversy in the Democratic Party at the presidential level. Let's just watch this from the debate in Las Vegas.
As a senator from a rural state, what I can tell Secretary Clinton, that all the shouting in the world is not going to do what I would hope all of us want, and that is keep guns out of the hands of people who should not have those guns and end this horrible violence that we are seeing.
Okay, so you watched this debate, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, when Bernie Sanders said that, did you think he was taking a shot at Hillary Clinton or making a comment about the gun debate in America?
It's a good question. I have to say that this is such an incredibly important issue to discuss, and I did feel like a little offended that he thought it was all about shouting and about such an important issue. Did I think it was a shot at her? No, I didn't. But I am concerned about his position on all of this because there are women and men across this country who are incredibly upset about gun violence. It is a major issue, and I really felt across the board that he was taking those concerns really lightly.
Okay, that's a fair point. But Secretary Clinton had a different point of view about that comment, or at least says she had a different point of view. So let's watch another piece of tape and see what she had to say in the last few days.
I've been told to stop shouting about ending gun violence. Well, I haven't been shouting, but sometimes when a woman speaks out, some people think it's shouting.
So she has made that comment several times in the last few days, and apparently she took Senator Sanders' comment as a personal slight against her. Do you think she's also being accused now of kind of trying to play the victim card by doing what I just said she did? Do you think she's doing that, playing the victim card? Do you think there are political risks there?
No, I absolutely don't. I think what she's saying is that when, oftentimes when women stand up and really make their points clear, we've all known, at least most of the women watching today, have had an experience where folks thought they were shouting when it wasn't about shouting. It was actually about talking very seriously about issues.
But in this context, she's referring to Senator Sanders and what he said. You said before you didn't think he was even referring to her. But
I do think he's referring to a lot of folks who have been very adamant about this, and a lot of women who have been leading the fight on gun violence across the country. And I do think that is disrespectful.
Okay.
If you could wave a wand and change from the Affordable Care Act to single payer, would that be your preference?
Well, I think we need to just keep moving forward.
I understand, but which is a better system? If you didn't have to worry about the politics, would you rather the Affordable Care Act or single payer?
I think we have a very strong system, and we've gotten more and more Americans on health insurance, and I think this is good.
Which would you prefer if you could have your way?
Personally, I'm not a healthcare expert, and what I expect in our Congress and our government is to really look at all these issues and what is the best for this country.
So you don't want single payer?
So no, I want folks to have access to health care in the best way they can. And if that's insurance coverage, I think that's great.
Okay. What's the scope of what Emily's List will do to help Hillary Clinton win the nomination? How much will you spend? What kind of foot soldiers do you have?
Well, Emily's List is a movement of 3 million women and good men who with us who are very excited about this race. So we're going to be behind her on the campaign trail. I actually was personally just up in New Hampshire doing Women for Hillary events across the state.
But what does that mean?
But what we're also doing, well, more importantly, what the real question is how much money are you putting into this? And we have a great partnership with Priorities USA, where Emily's List is going to be leading the way, talking to millennial women in particular. It's a $20 million project that we are focused on in 2016, and we feel like it's a
Is that
huge
just for the
opportunity.
nomination fight, or also if she's a nominee for the general, the $20 million?
Yeah, we're going to start it in early 2016 and go throughout. And we're going to engage millennials, and particularly millennial women in battleground states across the country.
So Hillary Clinton's not the only woman running for president. Over in the other party, you got Carly Fiorina, who also would be a historic nominee and a historic president if she were ultimately to be elected president. What do you make of Carly Fiorina's campaign?
Well, what we say at Emily's List is we would love to cheer for a Republican woman. Except the problem is with Carly Fiorina and often with Republican women candidates is they don't stand up for women and families. And it's why we so proudly support Hillary Clinton and support Democratic women across the country. It's not just about being a woman. Though we do need more women leaders in this country. It is about what you're going to do and who you're fighting for.
Do you think if she was the Republican nominee, she would be the Republican who would stand the best chance of narrowing the gender gap in a general election, or is there another Republican you worry about more?
I think right now we're looking at an entire group of Republican candidates running for president who have alienated women across the country. I mean, we're looking at very likely having a Republican nominee, whoever it is, who's going to be the most extreme we've ever seen on women's health care. That is going to increase the gender. It does not matter about gender. It is about the positions they're taking, and women voters are not going to stand with the Republican nominee, no matter who he or she is.
Did you get Hillary Clinton a birthday present?
We did get her a really nice card.
Nice card. What did it look like?
It's a big card with lots of wonderful signatures of our members across the country.
Okay. Stephanie Schriock, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Coming up, can Donald Trump actually really truly be the Republican nominee? The definitive answer when we come back.
Gotham City. Today, our Sahil Kapoor, our colleague, wrote a story on BloombergPolitics.com that was called Why Donald Trump Could Win the Republican Nomination. After the story was published, the real Donald Trump himself tweeted about the story and gave Sahil a generous mention. Thanks for joining us. This is arguably the biggest question in American presidential politics today. Can Trump be nominated? Tell us about your thesis.
Mark, thanks for having me on. My thesis essentially looked into the reasons why Donald Trump has been making so many waves and why he's captured the heart of the Republican Party at this point. The unifying thread from which all of this flows is campaign finance. He's a billionaire. He's self-funded. He doesn't have to play to any donors. And as a result, he's able to take a number of positions that reflect the populist tide in the Republican Party and are, that positions that are not supported by the donor base. And I'll give you some examples. On Social Security and Medicare cuts, he opposes that. He wants to protect both the programs. On free trade, he opposes the TPP. On immigration, he wants to reduce overall levels in the long term, and he wants to show no mercy for the people who are already here. Republican donors are on the other side of all these things, and there's a significant gap between what the base wants and what the donors want. And Donald Trump is exploiting that very well. He's the only candidate who has this sort of ability to do that, given that he doesn't need their money.
I will say, I think, would say he wants to show a tiny bit of mercy to some of those who are already here. Tiny bit. All right.
Just a tiny bit.
Debatable.
Yeah. Sahil, we talked a little earlier in the show about Ben Carson. Carson now leading in Iowa in 4 consecutive polls. He's taken the lead in a national poll. How much of a threat to Donald Trump, to the scenario you lay out, is Ben Carson?
John, I think he's a threat in Iowa, certainly. There have been a number of polls that show him up in Iowa, and it's pretty safe to say that Ben Carson is the front runner in Iowa. Nationally, I think we've only seen one poll that shows Ben Carson up this morning, the New York Times CBS poll, and that was within the margin of error. So I don't think it's safe to say that Carson is the front runner nationally. I think in Iowa he poses a real threat because the evangelical contingent of the Republican Party is very large, and that's not a natural strength for Donald Trump the way it is for Ben Carson. I think at the same time, if Donald Trump loses Iowa, he remains strong in New Hampshire, and he's far ahead in South Carolina and Nevada. So losing Iowa doesn't necessarily hurt his hopes. But I think if he loses Iowa and New Hampshire, you kind of get a narrative where Trump has been the winner all along. He prides himself on being the winner, and suddenly you have a narrative where he's not winning. So that could be a problem if he loses both the first 2 states, I think.
Two-part question. First, I'm curious about this. When Mr. Trump tweets about you, did you add a lot of followers today?
I haven't checked, but I have tried as hard as I could not to look at my mentions.
Okay. Second is, you quote Steve Schmidt, the Republican strategist, saying, in effect, people better stop thinking that Trump can't be nominated because he can. As you talk to Republicans political types, are there still a lot who say in the end Trump can't be nominated, or do they now in general believe that he can be?
There are still a lot of them, Mark, who think he can't be nominated, but I think that's shifting. I think the fact that he's been up in the polls for 100 days now, I think people are starting to look, and they're moving beyond the denial stage for sure. I don't think they're anywhere close to a point of, accepting or being willing to embrace him if he is the nominee. But I think, there has been a sort of reality check that's happened over the last few weeks when he just keeps going up and up, and he's been leading nationally.
So, Sahil, I asked you about Ben Carson a second ago. If Carson is not the biggest potential disruptor of the Trump scenario, who is? Is it someone else from the right like Ted Cruz, or is it some establishment candidate who ultimately consolidates the establishment vote?
John, I think Ted Cruz is a major threat for the reasons that you guys just discussed, especially in Iowa, because he has that ability. He has that ability with evangelical Christian voters. At the same time, I think the bigger overall threat is Marco Rubio. I spoke to Norm Ornstein yesterday, and he made an interesting point that Rubio may be the only person who can effectively bridge the gap between the establishment wing of the party and the conservative wing of the party. Rubio has the persona, the attitude of an establishment or a mainstream Republican, but he has the voting record of a very, very, very ideologically conservative Republican. So if he has the ability to bridge those two sides, then I think Rubio could be, potentially the favorite to win the nomination, but that's still a big if. He hasn't quite had his moment. And the other question about Rubio is when he does have his moment, people are expecting he will. Does he have the resources and the organization to build off of it and to keep it going?
Sahil, thanks a lot again. Stories up on BloombergPolitics.com right now about whether Donald Trump can win this thing. When we come back, John and I predict at sports after this word from our sponsors.
Tonight, the World Series starts at Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City. The greatest game, the greatest event, the greatest moment. Mark, I want to ask you the perennial question. Who you got? You already know who I got. Look who I got. This is who I got. Who you got?
In this series, starting pitching versus relief pitching, two teams of destiny, I go with the team with the home field advantage. Kansas City in 6 or 7.
Oh, I love that in this moment we are in the disagreement zone so deeply. The Mets starting rotation, all of that power, those power arms going to dominate this series and bring the World Championship home here to Gotham City, hopefully right here to the set.
And who you got in the debate tomorrow night?
Oh, in the debate tomorrow night. Well, I'm less clear. No one has the arm that the Mets starting rotation has in this debate, but I think that it's going to be an important night, as we discussed, for Ben Carson, Jeb Bush, and Donald Trump. Those are the three ones to watch.
It's tonight, the two C's, Cruz and Carson. Tomorrow night, we will be live from Boulder, Colorado. 1 hour episode of With All Due Respect. Get used to the 1 hour because next week we go to an hour full time. Until tomorrow, sayonara.